Food was plentiful in ancient Egypt, thanks to the nutrient-dense soil along the banks of the river Nile. Every year, the river burst its banks and flooded the surrounding land. The thick black silt it left behind made the soil perfect for planting and growing crops. Farmers used oxen or simple wooden tools to plow the fields and sow seeds. They then used a special device called a shaduf to water the crops. A shaduf looked a bit like a seesaw with ropes hanging from either end. A bucket was tied to one rope and a heavy weight to the other. Farmers pulled the first rope to lower the bucket into the water, then pulled the other rope to bring the bucket back up out of the river. They could then use this to water their crops. Whole towns or villages gathered all of their grain together in big grain stores. It was important to keep the food dry by storing it in lidded containers. This way, it would stay fresh for many years in case of famine. The staple food in ancient Egypt was bread made from emmer, a kind of wheat. It could also be used to make a thick, nutritional, weak beer. Even children drank beer, because water from the Nile was not clean enough to drink, and there were not many wells. Other foods popular in ancient Egypt included green vegetables, onions, garlic, lentils, dates, figs, fish, birds, butter, cheese, and eggs. Egyptians also enjoyed drinking wine with spices and honey, or fruit juice made from dates.
This is a replica of an ancient Egyptian ruler that was found in the tomb of Maya in the New Kingdom or the 19th dynasty during the reign of Ramses II. This tool was used in order to measure and assist in shaping and preparing different objects and tombs and temples of ancient Egypt. Most rulers were made into one solid piece, but this one could actually be folded. Today I'm going to explain the components of the measurements that were applied to this ruler, and it's going to start from this end and work its way to the very end. By the New Kingdom, the ruler finally had been standardized, even though prior there were many different sizes. This ruler, which is a replica from a tomb, measures 52.3 centimeters, and that was the standard used to define the royal cubit. This ruler has 3 sections. The first one by which they measured was they started off by measuring a finger, which is known as a jabah, so you could see 1 finger, 2 finger, 3 finger, and you can put them together and shape 3 fingers. Now, after passing 3 fingers, you entered into the palm. Each ruler measured 28 fingers and 7 palms. So right away, you could see here that it indicates a palm, so now you formed 1 palm. After the palm, once you have the 4 fingers, you get the hand. And from here, you could see that this covers the hand. 5 fingers create a hand. After the hand, you get the fist. So when you go from the hand and you close it to a fist, you get 6 fingers. So 6 fingers create a closed fist. After the fist, you get 2 palms, which creates 8 fingers. And you can see the 2 palms over there. 2 palms. Then you get the 3 palms, which creates the small span, and 3 palms and a half creates the large span. Then you get the sacred measurement, which is 4 palms. Then by the 5th palm, you get the remen. Then it completes by the small cubit, small, 6 palms, and then finally by the royal cubit, the 7 palms. On the right side of the ruler, you get the fractions, going by half a finger, a third, a fourth, a fifth, all the way to the 16th, 1/16. And finally, each finger of the 28 sections has a god associated to it, dedicated to the gods of Heliopolis, from where the owner comes from.
Builders of the pyramids, and perhaps the most iconic of ancient peoples, the ancient Egyptians, were isolated for more than a millennia from any significant foreign military threat. Forbidding deserts protected most of its substantial borders from incursion, leaving only a few strategic points that were necessary to fortify. These fortresses, along with a conscript army of 1 out of every 100 able-bodied men, called up when needed, was sufficient protection for the first 2 great epochs of Egyptian history, called by Egyptologists the Old and Middle Kingdoms. Weapons during this lengthy time period of Egyptian history changed little. Egyptian units were typically divided into spearmen or bowmen, employing a simple, mass-produced stave bow, effective in massed volleys. Although small copper daggers and axes were used during this period, the preferred sidearm was a simple yet effective weapon, the mace, consisting of a wooden handle with a stone or copper head at the end, wielded by a strong individual quite capable of crushing bone and rendering a foe incapacitated with one well-placed strike. Egyptian warfare changed forever after the roughly 100-year period of Hyksos domination. These people of possibly mixed Semitic and Hurrian ancestry introduced the Egyptians to a variety of new weapons, bronze smelting, and the horse and chariot. Nubia also took advantage of the situation to conquer the south and subdue the Egyptian southern fortresses that had remained unbreached for many centuries. This century left the Egyptians so traumatized that a military state developed. Considerations of birth and privilege of the royal and priestly class that completely dominated Egyptian society beforehand was gradually but not completely supplanted by a warrior caste centered around the pharaoh's chariot corps. Adept commanders could rise to the highest levels of Egyptian society, and accomplished soldiers could rise to the officer level and secure positions for their offspring if capable. 2 permanent standing armies were created for the first time in Egyptian history, one in Upper Egypt and one in Lower Egypt. These were supported by conscripts, who were called up at the rate of 1 in 10, rather than 1 out of 100 able-bodied men, when the need arose. A massive bureaucratic infrastructure was developed to run stud farms for the pharaoh's chariots, keep the army paid and fed, run a spy network, and message couriers who operated across the ancient Near East. The bronze khopesh sickle sword replaced the mace as the preferred close combat sidearm for Egyptian soldiers. The back could have possibly been used to pull away an enemy's shield, exposing him to a deadly strike with this slashing weapon. Also highly favored by the Egyptians during this period after the Hyksos, known as the New Kingdom, were a variety of battle axes, both single and double-handed, where the shield would be slung over the back. The typical New Kingdom Egyptian army was arrayed with infantry in the front, archers behind them where they could rain down a volley of arrows in relative safety, and the chariots and skirmishers on either wing. It was during the New Kingdom that the Egyptian Empire reached its greatest territorial extent, battling Bronze Age Mesopotamian empires and city-states in vast battles under the pretext of protecting their borders, and the glory of the pharaohs, who proudly described their prowess with the chariot and bow, their ability to marshal formations of troops on the field of battle, and their glories at the end of war.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. لو حبينا نتكلم بلغة المصريين القدماء واللي البعض بيسموها اصطلاحا باللغة الهيروغليفية القديمة ونقول جملة سيدة جميلة، هنقول إيو نفرت ست. ولو حبينا نقول الشمس بتظهر في الصباح والقمر يظهر في المساء، فهنقول رع إم دوات إعح إم جرح. ولو حبينا نعد من 1 لحد 9 فهنقول بالترتيب وع سن خمت فدو ديو سيسو سيفيخو خيمينو بسج. اي حد هيسمع الكلام ده للوهله الاولى هيبقى مستغرب. الهيروغليفيه القديمه احنا فكينا الشفره بتاعتها من خلال ترجمه الرموز اللي منقوشه على جدران المعابد والمسلات. ازاي بقى قدرنا من شويه رموز ونقوشات ان احنا نتوصل لمعرفه لغه بالكامل، بل وطريقه نطقها كمان؟ في البداية في اعتقاد خاطئ شائع عند كتير من الناس، وهو انهم بيعتقدوا ان الهيروغليفية هي لغة المصريين القدماء. الكلام ده غير صحيح اطلاقا. الهيروغليفية ما هياش لغة اصلا، الهيروغليفية طريقة للكتابة. الله، امال المصريين القدماء كانوا بيتكلموا ايه؟ كانوا بيتكلموا اللغة المصرية القديمة. وتعالوا بقى بالراحة نوضح الكلام ده. المصريين القدماء كانوا بيتواصلوا بينهم وبين بعضهم بلغة زيهم زي اي شعب تاني، وبيعتقد انها كانت احد اللغات السامية، وكان المصريين بيقولوا عليها ران ان كيمت، واللي هي معناها را يعني لسان، وان واللي تعتبر أداة ملكية، وكيمت اللي هي مصر، فتبقى الجملة على بعضها لسان مصر او لسان اهل مصر. كمان اللغة بتاعتهم كانوا بيوصفوها وصف تاني واللي هو ميدو نتر، ومحدش يزعل لو في أي حاجة أنا نطقتها غلط لأن هيروغليفي وكده. وميدو يعني كلمات، ونتر يعني الإله أو القدسية، وعلشان كده الوصف ده معناه كلمة الإله أو الكلمة المقدسة. الطفرة الحقيقية بقى في لغة المصريين القدماء حصلت لما قرروا انهم يكتبوا اللغة بتاعتهم. على مدار تاريخ المصريين القدماء لغتهم اتكتبت ب4 خطوط حسب احتياجهم لكل طريقة. في البداية كانوا محتاجين طريقة كتابة رسمية يكتبوا بيها الأحداث على جدران المعابد والمسلات، وده كان أول ظهور للكتابة الهيروغليفية القديمة اللي احنا عارفينها، واستمدوا الرسوم بتاعت حروفها من الطبيعة حواليهم. حيوان العقاب مثلا كانوا بيستخدموه كدلالة على حرف الألف أو صوت طائر البومة كان دلالة على حرف الميم، ثعبان الكبرى كان دلالة على الجيم المعطشة، والأسد كان بيدل على حرف اللام، وهكذا. ده غير بقى عشرات الأشكال التانية اللي بعضها بيحمل أكتر من صوت واللي بعضها الآخر بيكون كلمة كاملة. إذن الهيروغليفية ما هي إلا طريقة كتابة استخدمها المصريين القدماء علشان يدونوا النقوش بتاعتهم، لكن برضو ما هياش طريقة الكتابة الوحيدة اللي استخدموها. ظهر بين الناس وخصوصا الكهنة أسلوب جديد من الكتابة، وهي الكتابة الهيراتيقية، واللي بتعني الخط الكهنوتي، وده لأن الكهنة كانوا أكتر ناس بيستخدموا الأسلوب ده في الكتابة، واللي كان بيستخدم في تدوين النصوص الدينية. والفكرة في الكتابة الهيراتيقية إن الرموز بتاعتها أبسط شوية من رموز الهيروغليفية ومش بتحتاج دقة كبيرة في الرسم، فعلشان كده كانت مناسبة أكتر للكتابة السريعة خصوصا على أوراق البردي. وكان الاختصار اللي بيحصل في طريقة الكتابة بيكون كالتالي: بدل ما نرسم تعبان بدقة شديدة يستبدل بخط مايل واخد شكل التعبان، بدل ما نرسم بومة بكل تفاصيلها نرمز له بشكل أبسط شوية، وهكذا. وطرق الكتابة برضه ما وقفتش عند الهيراتيقية، ظهر بعدها طريقة جديدة اتعرفت باسم الكتابة الديموطيقية أو الخط الشعبي، ودي بقى الكتابة اللي استخدمها الشعب كله بكل طبقاته في المعاملات اليومية، فكانوا بيستعملوها في الرسائل والوثائق التجارية وعقود البيع والشراء وغيرها من الحاجات. وخلينا نأكد مرة تانية، كل اللي بنتكلم عنه ده ما هي إلا طرق كتابة، ما هياش لغات ولا أي حاجة. الهيروغليفية والهيراتيقية والديموطيقية كانوا خطوط لنفس اللغة الأم. وهنا بقى خلينا نسألكم سؤال: هل كنتم معتقدين ان الهيروغليفية هي اللغة بتاعت اهل مصر، ولا كنتوا عارفين من الاول انها مجرد طريقة للكتابة؟ اكتبوا لنا في التعليقات وورونا الفضايح. وبالمرة وانتوا تحت اللايك الجميل بقى علشان بيساعدنا نوصل لاكبر عدد من الناس، واشتراك وتفعيل الجرس للي لسه ما اشتركش. نرجع لموضوعنا. الكتابات الثلاثة اللي اتكلمنا عنهم فضلوا موجودين لحد الغزو الروماني لمصر. في الوقت ده الرومان فرضوا اللغة بتاعتهم كلغة رسمية داخل البلاد، وعلشان كده في الفترة دي ظهرت طريقة كتابة جديدة استخدمها المصريين للمرة الأولى، وهي الكتابة القبطية. والكتابة دي كانت عبارة عن اللغة المصرية القديمة لكن مكتوبة بحروف يونانية. وكان الهدف من الكتابة الغريبة دي هي إن الرومان يعرفوا يقروا النصوص والكتابات المصرية ويقدروا يتواصلوا معاهم، لكن للأسف الموضوع ده تسبب في موت الكتابات المصرية القديمة اللي هي الهيروغليفية والهيراتيقية والديموطيقية. اللغات دي ما بقاش ليها أي وجود إطلاقا، وما بقاش فيه حد بيستعملهم، ومع الوقت الناس ما بقتش تكتب غير بالكتابة القبطية وبس. وعلشان كده وبعد مئات السنين أصبحت النقوش الهيروغليفية القديمة حاجة أشبه بالطلاسم الغير مفهومة، واختفت تماما كل معالم اللغة المصرية القديمة. بعد حوالي 2000 سنة من ضياع اللغة المصرية، الضابط بيير فرانسوا بوشار أحد جنود الحملة الفرنسية في مصر اكتشف حجر أسود موجود عليه نقوشات غريبة. الحجر ده كان حجر رشيد، واللي بدأت معاه رحلة جديدة على إيد الباحثين علشان استعادة اللغة المصرية القديمة مرة تانية. لكن للأسف المهمة دي كانت في غاية الصعوبة، مفيش أي حد وقتها كان يعرف المصريين القدماء بيتكلموا إزاي أو إيه حتى معنى النقوش دي. لكن لحسن الحظ حجر رشيد كان مكتوب عليه نص واحد مترجم ب3 طرق كتابة مختلفة: الهيروغليفية والديموطيقية واليونانية القديمة، واللي كانت عبارة عن رسالة من كهنة مدينة منف إلى الملك بطليموس الخامس. ومن خلال الحجر ده بدأ الباحثين يقارنوا ال3 نصوص ببعض لحد ما توصلوا للأبجدية بتاعة الهيروغليفية القديمة. وكنا اتكلمنا عن الموضوع ده قبل كده في حلقة مفصلة هتلاقوها على العشوائيات باسم حجر رشيد. دلوقتي بقى بعد ما أسسنا للكلام ده كله، ازاي بقى قدروا ينطقوا الهيروغليفية من خلال نص مكتوب بس؟ الإجابة على السؤال ده بتبدأ عند الفيزيائي البريطاني توماس يونغ، واللي كان من المهتمين برموز اللغة الهيروغليفية. طرف الخيط كان إن يونغ لاحظ حاجة غريبة وهو بيبص على حجر رشيد. النص الهيروغليفي كان فيه مجموعة من الرموز موجودة جوه مستطيل أو شكل بيضاوي اتسمى فيما بعد بالخرطوشة. اللي يونغ لاحظه إن الخرطوشة دي بنفس الرموز اللي فيها بالظبط اتكررت في النص الهيروغليفي أكتر من مرة، وهنا خمن إن الرموز دي إما اسم ملك أو اسم مدينة. ولما قرأ النص اليوناني اللي على الحجر اكتشف إن الاسم الوحيد اللي اتكرر في النص اليوناني كان اسم الملك بطليموس، ومن هنا خمن إن رموز الخرطوشة الغريبة دي ممكن يكون لفظها بطليموس. وبالرغم من الإنجاز اللي ينجح حققه إلا إنه توقف لحد هنا وما كانش قادر يتأكد من دقة عمله وهل اللي توصل له ده صح ولا غلط. وهنا بقى جه دور جون فرانسوا تشامبليون، واللي فعلا قدر يثبت صحة افتراضات يونغ. تشامبليون جاب الخرطوشة اللي فيها اسم بطليموس ووزع حروف الاسم باليونانية على رموز الخرطوشة، لأنه في الغالب الكلمات اللي زي الأسماء والحاجات دي هتتنطق في اللغات المختلفة كلها بنفس الهجاء. وبناء عليه حدد إن رمز الشكل المربع اللي بيرمز للمنزل أو المقعد جوه الخرطوشة مرتبط بصوت با، والرمز بتاع رغيف الخبز اللي تحته مرتبط بصوت تا، والرمز اللي شبه العقدة ومفتاح الحياة في نفس الوقت ده مرتبط بالصوت او، ورمز الأسد مرتبط بصوت ال، وهكذا. بس الكلام ده برضه ما زلنا محتاجين نتأكد من صحته، وده اللي قدر يعمله تشامبليون جاب خرطوشة تانية كانت موجودة على أحد المسلات واللي برضه كان مكتوب عليها نص هيروغليفي ونص تاني يوناني، لكن المرة دي كان مكتوب فيه كلمة كليوباترا. ولحسن الحظ كلمة كليوباترا هي كمان موجود فيها الأصوات با وأو وإل، وكانوا برضه موجودين فيها في الأماكن المظبوطة كرمز أسد ورمز مفتاح حياة منحني وشكل المربع. وده معناه إن الفرضية الصوتية بتاعة شامبليون طلعت صحيحة. واخيرا بقى تشامبليون والباحثين من بعده كرروا موضوع الهجاء الحرفي ده مئات المرات على اسماء الملوك والمدن اللي زي رمسيس واحمس وطيبة وكيمت وغيرهم، لحد ما قدرنا نوصل في النهاية لنطق كل الحروف الابجدية الهيروغليفية، وقدرنا نتعلم اللغة المصرية القديمة ونتكلم بيها كمان.
Mathematics. The Egyptians needed a good understanding of mathematics and geometry to build the pyramids and other large buildings. They also used math and numbers to keep track of business transactions. For numbers, they used a decimal system. They didn't have numerals for 2 through 9 or 0. They just had numbers for factors of 10, such as 1, 10, 100, etc. In order to write the number 3, they would write down 3 number 1s. To write the number 40, they would write down 4 number 10s. The Egyptian number for 1 million was a picture of a god with his arms raised in the air. You can learn more about these civilizations in the links below.
Hello, and welcome to the second episode of The History of Astronomy by Stello. Last time, we discussed ancient Mesopotamians, their view of the world, their mathematical and scientific contributions to astronomy, and the complex weave of gods that they built up around the stars. Today, we turn to a civilization further down the Mediterranean coast, home to great peoples built up around the Nile, the giver of life in the midst of arid desert. Today, we'll be taking a look into the ancient Egyptian civilization, their complex calendars, religious beliefs, and monumental structures. Herodotus, a Greek historian, was the first to refer to Egypt as the gift of the Nile, as the civilization's survival depended almost entirely on the river, which flooded yearly, predictably fertilizing the area around it. Kemet, as it would have been known to the ancient Egyptians, was exceedingly stable, much more so than its counterparts. For over 4,000 years, with minor disturbances in between, it existed in more or less the same form, while neighboring civilizations constantly arose and fell in flames. Because of the Nile floods and the high agricultural potency of the region, Egypt developed a dense population early on, centered around the Nile and its delta. Unperturbed for countless centuries, they developed an advanced system of mathematics and erected some of the most impressive structures known to man, many of which stand to this day. Their religion, science, and arts were all very highly advanced, and due to a combination of these factors, they were able to hold off the sea peoples that brought about the Bronze Age collapse. Though weakened, they continued to prosper, while prominent civilizations, such as those of the Hittites and the Macedonians, withered into irrelevance. Regardless, Egypt continued to be an essential center of worldwide trade, exporting gold, linen, papyrus, and manufactured goods, while importing obsidian, incense, oil, myrrh, and various other commodities. Any discussion of Egyptian astronomy must begin with Nabta Playa, one of, if not the, oldest archaeoastronomical devices anywhere in the world. Dating to 7000 BC, it is far older than the Egyptian Old Kingdom, likely being built by nomadic herders to mark the summer solstice and subsequent monsoons. In ancient times, the region was also home to a great lake, no doubt an attraction for herders looking to water their animals. Because of Nabta Playa's orientation, historians have suggested that the structure originally indicated the rising of certain stars, notably Sirius. Its shape, too, is resemblant of Orion's belt, and the slabs upon it would have allowed the nomads to predict the direction of the summer solstice sunrise. Following the construction of Nabta Playa, several megaliths were constructed in and around the site, aligning to various other stars in the sky, possibly including Arcturus, Alpha Centauri, and the Orion belt. Indeed, the ancient Egyptians were constructing intricate astronomical structures from the very dawn of civilization itself. Sometime around 3150 BC, Menes, according to Egyptian tradition, is thought to have unified Upper and Lower Egypt. After a period of around 400 years, the 4th dynasty pharaoh, Khufu, was immortalized to the Great Pyramid of Giza, built in the 26th century BC over a period of 30 years, reaching an immense height of 146.5 meters with its limestone shell, a metric which would not be beaten for almost 4,000 years. The placement and orientation of the pyramids, however, was not an accident. Indeed, they were aligned to several celestial bodies, among these the pole star. To the Egyptians, however, this would not have been Polaris, but Alpha Draconis instead, due to the precession of the equinoxes. At the temple of Amun-Re, a corridor was specially built such that only the rising of the midwinter sun would illuminate it fully. At all other times, it would remain only partially lit. The Egyptians also aligned the pyramids with the 4 cardinal directions, such that their corners were only a fraction of a degree away from the true axes. Additionally, several air shafts were constructed, being aligned with special stars or areas of the sky, notably to Sirius, which marked the new Egyptian year. The shaft's purpose is unknown. Perhaps they are connected to the cycle of life and death, or related to ascension rituals. Nevertheless, the fascinating construction of the pyramids is a wonderful insight into the true depth of knowledge that the architects of the Pyramid of Giza had about the stars. The Egyptians initially used a lunar calendar, utilizing a sidereal calendar to regulate it. However, soon, there were discrepancies between the lunar and solar years, and the Egyptians were forced to come up with a new solution. They developed a complex civil calendar, being 365 days long and divided into 12 months of 30 days in length. The primary purpose of this calendar was to provide a unified system of timekeeping for Egyptian society, with the lunar calendar being reserved for religious purposes. Being a primarily dry climate, the Egyptians partitioned their calendar based on the flooding of the Nile. Akhet, the flood season, was from September to January. Peret, the winter season, was from January to May. Shemu, the summer season, was from May to September. Contrary to what might expect, the Egyptian New Year began on the first day of Akhet, marking the start of the Nile floods. Coincidentally, Sirius reappeared on this day, leading historians to believe that the calendar may have been developed from astronomical observations of the star. There were further intricacies of the Egyptian calendar that are of note. For one, since the Egyptians had 12 months of 30 days, they made up for the remaining 5 days of the calendar with an intercalary month. During this period, great festivities would be held, celebrating the births of Nephthys, goddess of air, Isis, counterpart to Osiris and the embodiment of cosmic order, Horus, god of the sky, Set, god of violence, disorder, and storms, and Osiris, god of fertility, agriculture, life, and resurrection. The Egyptians did not have unique names for months of the year, rather affixing them to the season in which they took place. For example, July was the third month of Peret, the winter season, and was denoted as such. There were also problems with the Egyptian calendar, the same faced by many early calendars. Because the Egyptian year was 1/4 of a day too short, every 4 years the appearance of Sirius became a day misaligned with the Egyptian New Year. After 1,460 years, the star would finally rise on the correct day, and this was met with great celebration and festivities. To solve this problem, Ptolemy III later attempted to add a leap day, similar to the Julian calendar, every 4 years. However, the Egyptian populace and priests resisted the change, and the plan was eventually scrapped. Besides a calendar, the Egyptians came up with a novel system of dividing the ecliptic plane. They segregated the sky into 36 separate groups of stars, known as decans, meant to aid astronomical observations and horological predictions. Every 10 days, a new decan appeared at dawn. This was used by the Egyptians as a measure of sidereal time, as well as a subdivision of the year and days, allowing for an eventual system of splitting the day into 12 daytime and 12 nighttime hours. Later, Hellenic influences led to these decans gaining a degree of symbolic significance. Each began to represent various things and concepts, such as the cardinal directions, the 4 elements, and so on. As in most other ancient civilizations, astronomy and astrology were extremely important to cultural and religious practices, for the Egyptians more so than most. One example of this is the Egyptian concept of the afterlife, which was believed to be intimately connected and nestled within the stars. Accordingly, intricate star maps were constructed on tomb ceilings, thought to guide the dead to the afterlife, and also to serve as a temporal and positional guide for the living world. Calendars, besides being exceedingly important for agriculture and other such productive activities, were also essential to the planning of religious festivals and special occasions. Additionally, astronomical phenomena and the reappearance of certain stars or decans within the night sky dictated many ancient Egyptian events, a testament to the value of astronomy to them. The Egyptians also created a precise sundial and stellar clock, allowing for one to record the passing of the daytime hours, as well as a unique water clock, used to tell time and serve as a stopwatch of sorts. The gods, too, were linked with the stars, with many being ascribed to particular deities. Isis, for example, was associated with the star Sirius, the herald of the Nile floods. The cosmological view of the Egyptians is equally associated with astronomy, and in many ways is similar to that of the Sumerians. Above all, the Egyptians believed in the concept of Ma'at, the cosmic order holding the universe together. With it, there would be truth, order, and justice, yet, in its absence, only darkness and chaos would prevail. They viewed time as linear, however, they saw the renewal of Ma'at as a recurring concept within its bounds. Such renewals would occur with the daily journey of Ra, the god of the sun, the flooding of the Nile, the crowning of a new dynasty, and so on. These were seen to be prosperous events, restoring order and banishing chaos in the world. Their view of the world was decidedly geocentric. They thought of Earth as a flat plane, represented by Geb, over which rested the element of air, represented by Shu, and the sky, complete with all its stars and various phenomena, represented by Nut. Interestingly, the Egyptians also believed in a parallel underworld, which lay beneath the earth, complete with its own undersky. Beneath this was an infinite expanse of chaos, Nu. Within the entire fold, they believed in the Duat, a place of rebirth and renewal. Here, Ra, after traveling to the underside of the earth, would be reborn, rising anew at dawn. Indeed, the ancient Egyptian understanding of the universe was vast. From structures aligned perfectly with distant stars to a system of timekeeping exceptionally close to what is used today, astronomy was a vital component of their civilization. Forged in the banks of the Nile, Egypt, known for millennia as a center of culture, art, and science, pushed the field of astronomy forward in novel ways, shaping our understanding of the world today. Thanks for watching this episode of The History of Astronomy by Stello.